Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming. My name is Olivia. I'm a bookseller at Belmont Books. For those of you who don't know, Belmont Books is an independently owned bookstore in Belmont, Massachusetts, and we've been bringing books to the community since 2017. Before we begin, I'd like to let you know that we have a number of awesome virtual events coming up. On Tuesday, March 16th, we are hosting Patty Callahan and Whitney Scherer to discuss Patty's newest book, Surviving Savannah. And on Thursday, March 18th, we are hosting Michael Tugis and Robert Cazuzzo as Michael launches his new book, The Waters Between Us, A Boy, a Father, Outdoor Misadventures, and the Healing Power of Nature. You can register for those, the same place you registered for this one, on our website, belmontbooks.com. And that is also where you can purchase tonight's duologies, Sands of Arawiya, All the Stars and Teeth, Into the Crooked Place, and The Wrath of Ambar. We want to make sure this feels as much like a book party as possible. So please make sure that you are asking questions. You can do that in the Q&A or in the chat. Make sure if you do send something to the chat, you make it to panelists and attendees. Otherwise, we won't see what's going on. Alrighty, so with that, I'm very excited to introduce tonight's host, Rachel Strolle. Rachel is the Teen Services Coordinator at a library in the Chicago suburbs. She is currently a books coordinator for BuzzFeed, covering YA, middle grade, and more. In addition, she runs social media for Y'all Fest and Y'all West. Previously, she was a bookseller for 5 years, where she started their successful blind date with a book program and ran summer camps based off of YA genres and Divergent. And she wrote for the Barnes & Noble teen blog. With that, I'll turn it over to Rachel. Thank you all so much for coming.
Alrighty, so thank you so much to Belmont Books for hosting. Make sure anyone who's watching, if you can support Belmont Books through
I'm
participation.
so sorry, you guys. I just realized that I clicked the start button, but nothing actually happened. So I have done my whole little spiel for just you guys. So good warm up, everyone. All right, I'm gonna let's do a take two real quick and we'll get back into it. Okay, that's what it's gonna sound like. Here we go again. Alrighty, that should make more sense. We should start getting some people in here shortly. All right. All right, there we go. Here come our great friends. Okay, hello everyone, welcome. Thank you all so much for coming. My name is Olivia and I'm a bookseller at Belmont Books. For those of you who don't know, Belmont Books is an independently owned bookstore in Belmont, Massachusetts, and we've been bringing books to the community since 2017. Before we begin, I'd like to make sure that you know about all of our number of amazing virtual events coming up. On Tuesday, March 16th, we are hosting Patty Callahan and Whitney Scherer to discuss Patty's latest book, Surviving Savannah. And on Thursday, March 18th, we are hosting Michael Tugis and Robert Cazuzzo as Michael launches his new book, The Waters Between Us, A Boy, a Father, Outdoor Misadventures, and the Healing Power of Nature. You can register for those the same place you register for tonight's event, belmontbooks.com, and that is also where you can purchase tonight's amazing duologies, Sands of Arawiya, All the Stars and Teeth, Into the Crooked Place, and The Wrath of Ambar. We want this to feel as much like a book party as possible. So please feel free to talk in the chat, ask questions in Q&A. When you talk in the chat, make sure that the little blue 2 thing is sent to panelists and attendees. That way everybody can hang out together. I am very excited to introduce tonight's host, Rachel Strolle. Rachel is the Teen Services Coordinator at a library in the Chicago suburbs. She is currently a books contributor for BuzzFeed, covering YA, middle grade, and more. In addition, she runs social media for Y'all Fest and Y'all West. Previously, she was a bookseller for 5 years, and that was where she started their successful blind date with a book program and ran summer camps based off of YA genres and Divergent. And she wrote for the Barnes & Noble teen blog. With that, I will turn it over to you, Rachel. Thank you all so much for coming.
Alrighty, and thank you so much to Belmont Books for hosting us tonight. We're all very excited to be here. And I'm going to do some little mini intros for all of our wonderful authors. Does anyone want me to introduce them first, or am I going to pick a random order?
Random order.
Random order. Okay, we're gonna start with Hafsah, who is the New York Times bestselling author of We Hunt the Flame and the founder of Icy Designs. I have a candle burning somewhere in the background from Icy Designs. It smells so good. Where she creates websites for authors and beauteous goodies for everyone else. When she's not writing, she can be found designing, deciding between Assassin's Creed and Skyrim, or traversing the worlds in normal times. An imagination now, I'm assuming. Born in Florida and raised in California, she now resides in Texas with her family and a library of books waiting to be devoured. Alexandra Cristo decided to write books when she was 4, and her teacher told her she couldn't be a fairy, which I don't think is true. I think you can be a fairy if you want to. She is the author of To Kill a Kingdom and Into the Crooked Place. And when she's not busy making up stories, she can be found organizing food crawls over London, again, assuming in like other times, and binge watching Korean dramas. And she's got a BA in creative writing and currently lives in England with an abundance of cacti because they are the only plants she can keep alive, which all my plants are fake. So I understand that.
You know the struggle.
I do. Adalyn Grace graduated summa cum laude from Arizona State University when she was 19. She spent 4 years working in live theater and acted as the youngest ever managing editor of a nonprofit newspaper. During and after college, she studied storytelling as an intern on The Legend of Korra, and she splits time between San Diego and Arizona with her bossy cat and 2 dorky dogs, and spends her days writing full time while trying to find the city's best burrito. And she's the author of All the Stars and Teeth. There we go, the beautiful new turquoise paperback. We love it. And finally, we've got Tanaz, who writes books for young adults. They are the best books, though. Like all of these books are the best books. And her latest novel, Hunted by the Sky, which obviously now there's going to be the sequel, was named a Best Book of the Year by the CBC and USBBY, and is the first of her YA fantasy duology set in a world inspired by medieval India. Her novel, The Beauty of the Moment, won the Nautilus Gold Award for Young Adult Fiction and has also been nominated for the Ontario Library Association's White Pine Award. Her acclaimed debut, A Girl Like That, was named a Best Book of the Year by numerous outlets, including The Globe and Mail, 17, and The Times of India. Okay, there we go. So the first thing I would love is if you all could do a little intro to your books. And since we're doing duologies, and I'm assuming not everyone in the audience might have read everyone's books, I would love it if you could do like a short intro to the first book and then do like a notice to people that they need to cover their ears for spoilers if they don't want to know where book 2 starts off, and then just a little brief intro to like where the characters are at the start of book 2, if that sounds cool. Anyone want to start?
Do we just want to go in like,
I know everyone's squares are in different orders on different screens. So
okay.
Alexandra is the closest on my screen, if you want to go first.
I'm going first. So yeah, I'm Alexandra Cristo, and I'm the author of Into the Crooked Place, which is the first book in my duology, and that is about a group of black magic dealers who discover that their criminal kingpin has invented a new kind of magic that is too deadly even for them. So they decide that they're going to be the ones to team up and take him down. And so the story follows 4 crooks, Tavia, who is a black magic dealer, Wesley, who's her boss and kind of the kingpin, the bad guy's prodigy. Then we have Karam, who's the most deadly fighter in the realms, and Saxony, who is a girl hiding many secrets and seeking revenge for her family. So the story follows them, and then City of Spells, cover your ears for very, very minor spoilers. City of Spells picks off after they've had a big battle with the Kingpin, and they're in hiding in a forest, trying to assemble their army from all across the world, and also trying to save Wesley because of events in book 1. Poor guy's in danger. That's it.
We love to see it. Hafsah, you want to go?
Sure. Yeah, so Beyond the Flame is the first book. We Free the Stars is the second book. And so this is a duology set in a world inspired by ancient Arabia, where a girl, in Beyond the Flame, a girl named Zafira ventures to this villainous island where she has to retrieve a lost artifact that can save her dying world. At the same time, we have the Prince of the Kingdom sent on a similar mission to find her, kill her off, and steal the artifact for his father, the autocratic Sultan. Of course, when their paths cross on the island, that's not exactly what goes down, and an ancient evil brewing that they might have to join forces to defeat. Yeah, so those are the two main characters. Then we have the rest of the cast that forms this unlikely family of misfits. It's one of my favorite tropes, found family. And there's also an enemies to lovers romance and a goof and grump romance, which is also my favorite part of the series. Yeah, so We Free the Stars, which is a lot chunkier, picks up where we had the flame left off. And well, this is a big spoiler, but well, actually, I'll try to minimize the spoilers. But they basically leave behind a character.
Hi guys, sorry. We're having an enormous amount of trouble letting people in. I keep pushing the button and it just won't. So unfortunately, all this great stuff is lost. Well, not entirely lost. We are recording it. So I'm trying to figure it out. I'm really sorry. I just didn't want you guys to get too far in and then lose your great stuff. I think it's something that's happened with the setup. I'm going to try to begin again. I'm so sorry about all this. This is very frustrating, I'm sure. Just give me just one moment and I'm going to try again. I think there may be something wrong with how we set this up. I'm so sorry about this.
Technology.
Worries. Technology is always like that.
All right,
Yeah.
so let's try again.
Deep breath, Olivia, you can do it.
Thank you guys. All righty, let's see if we get some attendees joining us here. All right, here we go. All right, welcome everybody. So sorry about the late start. We're very excited that you're here. Yes, everybody is flooding in now and it's great to see those numbers going up. Welcome to all of our attendees and all of our panelists. Thank you all so much for being here. This is Belmont Books, and I'm going to shorten my intro here because I've already taken up enough of your time. We are so excited to have everybody, and I'm going to introduce Rachel Strolle, our amazing host tonight. All right. Rachel Strolle is a teen services coordinator at the Library of the Chicago Suburbs. She is currently a books contributor for BuzzFeed covering YA, middle grade, and more. In addition, she runs social media for Y'all Fest and Y'all West. Previously, she was bookseller for 5 years, where she started their successful blind date with a book program and ran summer camps based off of YA genres and Divergent. And she wrote for the Barnes & Noble teen blog. With that, I will turn it over to you guys. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you so much to Belmont Books for hosting us. Thank you everyone for waiting through our tech issues. You know, technology does what it wants and we deal with it. That's why we live in fantasy worlds where we don't necessarily need Zoom, right? That's why we're all here today to talk about these wonderful fantasy duologies. I am going to go through and give some brief intros to our wonderful authors, and then we'll talk about their books. Any attendees, if you have any questions, you can stick them in the Q&A box at the bottom, and I'll try and get as many as I possibly can when I open it up to audience questions. So we'll go in a different order. Tanaz writes best book. Oh, again, I keep seeing the lines. Writes books for young adults. Again, best books. These are all the best books. Her latest novel, Hunted by the Sky, was named a Best Book of the Year by the CBC and USBBY and is the first of a YA fantasy duology set in a world inspired by medieval India. And the sequel, Rising Like a Storm, releases on June 22nd. Hafsah is the New York Times bestselling author of We Hunt the Flame and the founder of Icy Designs, where she creates websites for authors and beauteous goodies for everyone else, including the best candles you've ever smelled in your life. There's one burning in the background somewhere. And when she's not writing, she can be found deciding between Assassin's Creed and Skyrim or traversing the world in normal times. Adalyn graduated summa cum laude from Arizona State University when she was 19, then spent 4 years working in live theater and acted as the youngest ever managing editor of a nonprofit newspaper. During and after college, she was an intern on Legend of Korra, and she is the author of All the Stars and Teeth. And finally, we've got Alexandra, who decided to write books when she was 4, and her teacher told her she couldn't be a fairy, which is an absolute lie. You can totally be a fairy. And she is the author of To Kill a Kingdom and Into the Crooked Place. And when she's not busy making up stories, can be found organizing food crawls over London, again, in other times, and binge watching Korean dramas. So I would love it if y'all could start with just giving us a little rundown of book 1 in the series, since I know not everyone may have read all 4 of these duology openers. And then if we can just like note, hey, I'm going to talk about book 2 now, so that people can like mute or plug their ears, like whatever they want to do to avoid spoilers, or keep listening. I mean, if you want to be spoiled, that's fine. You do you. So who did I say last? Alexandra, you want to start?
Yep, on it. Okay, so I'm Alexandra Cristo and I'm the author of Into the Crooked Place. This is the first book in my duology, and essentially it's about a group of 4 black magic dealers and misfits who team up to save the world after their criminal kingpin develops a new kind of magic that crosses the line even for them. So we have our character Tavia, who sells black magic on the streets. And we have Wesley, who's her boss and also the Kingpin's prodigy and loves his little bow ties. We have Karam, who's the deadliest fighter in the realms. And we have Saxony, who is hiding a lot of her past, but is seeking revenge on her family. So when these 4 kind of crooks team up, chaos obviously ensues. And the second book, City of Spells, which just came out, cover your ears for very minor spoilers, picks up where the previous book left off. Essentially, they've had their huge battle and now they're in hiding from the Kingpin, and the cities are slowly falling to his dark magic, and they're trying to assemble an army from all across the world to fight him. They're trying to save Wesley because the poor dude's in trouble because I'm evil. And yeah, they're just trying to struggle with the fact that they all want to kiss and kill each other and save the world or destroy it. Who knows?
Mood.
Yeah.
Hafsah, you want to go?
Yeah, of course, kiss or kill is like the biggest dilemma any book characters can have.
Right.
Yeah, okay, so hello everyone. I am the author of We Hunt the Flame and We Feed the Stars. We Hunt the Flame, well, the duology takes place in a world inspired by ancient Arabia, where a girl named Zafira ventures to this villainous island where she has to retrieve a lost artifact that can save her dying world. And at the same time, we have the prince of the kingdom who is sent on a similar mission to find her, kill her off, and steal the artifact for his father, the autocratic sultan. But of course, when their paths cross on the island, that's not exactly what goes down, and they discover an ancient evil brewing that they might have to join forces to defeat. So, well, the books have some of my favorite tropes, like an enemies to lovers romance, found family, a grump and goof romance. And so the sequel, which is a lot chunkier, takes place right where We Hunt the Flame left off. And no spoilers, but it's going to be, there's betrayal, someone loses an eyeball, and everything goes down in this book. Someone gets crowned the next ruler of Arawiya, and all this fun stuff. Lots of angst, lots of drama, lots of suffering, as it should be.
As it should be, indeed. Adalyn?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Adalyn. I am the author of All the Stars and Teeth and its sequel, All the Tides of Fate, which just came out in February. All the Stars and Teeth is about a morally gray princess who is forced to team up with a rather mysterious pirate to save her kingdom from a dangerous magical new threat. There are 7 different forms of magic. There are mermaids who may or may not like to eat people. It is one big fantastical adventure on a ship. And its sequel, I don't want to get too spoilery, but it deals with the aftermath of everything that happens in book 1, like sequels do.
Very descriptive.
Thank you.
Yes. And then, of course, finally, last but not least.
Hi, so my name is Tanaz Bhathena, and I'm the author of Hunted by the Sky and its upcoming sequel, to which I do not have a book, but I do have a cover, Rising Like a Storm, which comes out on June 22nd of this year. So this duology is set in a world inspired by medieval India and tells the story of a girl named Gul, who is prophesied to be the downfall of a tyrant king. When Gul's parents are murdered by the king's soldiers, she barely manages to escape and is rescued by a group of rebel women who train her in warrior magic. And by the time she's 16, the only thing on her mind is revenge. And so she eventually infiltrates the king's palace with the help of a reluctant stable boy named Kavas, who has some dark secrets of his own. What Gul and Kavas don't realize is that there are more secrets in the palace that they don't know of, and that also there's more to their burgeoning relationship than romance. The bond between them and the magic they realize may be the only way to end their kingdom's tyrannical rule. And without any spoilers, Rising Like a Storm shows them battling a new tyrant who's deadlier than any ruler they know. So, in summary, this duology contains chosen ones, enemies to lovers, fierce female warriors, magical creatures inspired by Indian and Persian mythology, and some very cranky ghosts.
Excellent, excellent. So real quick, I know we're going to talk more about them, but if those sounded good for y'all in the audience, I'm sure that Olivia at Belmont or maybe Brittany at Macmillan can drop the link into the chat of where you can purchase those wonderful books. I do have a really quick individual question for Tanaz, because you have had contemporaries before that. So what made you want to drift over to the fantasy world?
That's a great question. So I really loved reading fantasy as a child. I mean, I remember growing up, I'd read anything related to witches, werewolves, or vampires. Like R.L. Stine was my favorite. I really always wanted to read that. And my first short story when I was 11 was about a werewolf at a girls' boarding school. But, the thing was that whenever I tried to write fantasy, it always felt like, something was missing, because whenever I wrote more further going in, I was because I was growing up an Indian kid in Saudi Arabia, so I was surrounded by my culture and a different Gulfi culture, and all the books that I was reading were all by Western fantasy authors. So it was like this, I could never figure out how to integrate this third culture complexity of myself into my stories. And it took me a long time, when I was grown up. And then finally I wrote my first book. And then I thought to myself, I'm really, really kind of bored. I want to do something different. I always get bored easily with my writing. So I always want to do something different. And so I said, okay, I want to try a different genre. I was too scared to try fantasy. So instead I wrote a science fiction dystopian novel, which was really, really terrible. And so I had to shelve that. And but I really love the characters in that book. So I thought, what if I change things around? A friend of mine said, use magic. Come on, what have you got to lose, right? So I said, okay, let's do it. Let's put magic in there. And let's change the setting. I didn't like the setting. It was like a completely new world. So I said, okay, what if it was something inspired by India, or more specifically medieval India, which was a historical period that I was obsessed with as a teenager. I remember sleeping through most of history class, but when stories about the Mughals and the Rajputs and the Marathas came on, I'd be like, oh, I want to know what's happening. But in all these worlds full of labyrinthine palaces, many kingdoms that rose and fell over a short period of time, these fierce female warriors who were often relegated to footnotes in history. And I began researching and I began writing, and this book just suddenly exploded on the page. It just came out. So that's how it happened. Sorry for the long story.
Excellent. Well, your contemporaries are great. So I was very excited when I was like, fantasy, yes, excellent. So in terms of planning for a duology, did you all know that your books were going to be 2 books? Like, was that always in the plan? And did book 2 sort of end where you expected it to, either if you had it planned out from the beginning of book 1, or if you had planned out what was going to happen in book 2 after book 1 was finished, did it still end where you expected it to?
Well, for me, I always knew it was going to be a duology. So I always had that plan of, right, this is a series. I set out to write a series. My debut novel was a standalone. So I was like, right, something different, series, let's do it. I didn't really realize what I'd gotten myself into. I think there's only so much you can plan. Like, I knew roughly where I wanted them to end up. So I knew to start to end, but it's all the stuff in the middle. You can only really plan so much, because as the story grows and the characters grow and change and the world grows, half of your plans get thrown out the window. But I think that's kind of the fun part, because then the story even becomes a surprise for yourself and you get to watch your characters grow and change, which is the best part of a book, when they learn from their mistakes and they change into completely different people. So what you had planned for them in book 1 doesn't necessarily work in book 2, because their journey has progressed them.
Yeah, I always knew that I was going to do a series, but I didn't know exactly how many were going to be in this series. I think something a lot of people don't really think about, especially for anybody who wants to, get into writing as a career, traditional publishing. Sometimes you don't really know how long your series is going to be, because you don't know how many your publisher is going to buy. So I had to kind of shift things around, like, oh, how many are they buying? Okay, cool. It's 2 books. Got to figure that out. So it did change a little bit. But I feel like the bones of like what I wanted the story to be are very much there. But it's kind of, as you were saying, like things change as you're editing and you know, you're throwing out a whole bunch of ideas that no longer work. And you're like, oh, the character decided to do this. So now I have to like figure that out. So things definitely change, I think, with editing, but I had a vague direction, I guess.
For me, and We Had the Flame with We Free the Stars, and I actually wanted it to be a trilogy. Well, when I started writing the book, I was like, I was 19. I was like, this is going to be a 7-book series. It's going to be a ginormous series. It was my first time writing fantasy. And I was like, I'm going to go all out and write as many books as I can. But when I got really serious about the book, I was like, I think it's going to be a trilogy. But like Adalyn said, when I sold it to Macmillan, they just wanted a duology. And so I wrote, so We Had the Flame already been done. But through edits, it changed quite a bit. And then when my editor is like, no, I don't think we're going to take a 3rd book, I like pulling out extra plot lines that I had been ready to incorporate. So I always had a sense of how the series would end. And then I had to like pare down a whole bunch of the story. But I'm very happy with how it turned out. So.
For myself, I also, like Hafsah, thought I would write a trilogy. Ended up paring it down to a duology after I sold it to Macmillan. Seems to be a common thread. But I'm actually kind of grateful that this happened because the world in my head was so enormous that my editor said, let's just shrink it down to 1 kingdom and focus. And I think in the long run, it worked out better for me because I was really able to see the world in a more magnified sense. And I was able to explore different aspects of magic and my characters that I hadn't been able to explore in the first book. You always think that, oh, you know what, the things have to happen. They have to go to a different kingdom in each book, you know, that's what you're always thinking. But then when you start working it through, your characters can resolve their issues and their conflicts within a limited area, and at the same time you can still explore many facets that you really wanted to explore in this fantasy realm. Like, you know, you can deal with aspects of colonization and all sorts of things.
Excellent. And of course you have to pare it down because it's a duology and there's a pair. Anyways, so they're all on mute, but they were all laughing.
I laughed.
So once again, just as a reminder, you can drop your questions at any time in the Q&A box down at the bottom, and I will catch them once we get to the audience question portion. So in between finishing book 1 and going to work on book 2, and while you're drafting book 2, right? Was there stuff that you just forgot existed in your world? Did you ever like forget that one kingdom was on one side and you put it on the other side in book 2 and then you realized it when you were going through edits? Like how much had you forgotten or had to reacclimate yourself with from the end of book 1 to writing book 2?
I feel like this is a question that like assumes we ever stop. Like, at least for me, there was no zero break between writing these books. So I literally didn't have a chance to forget anything in the first book. Because that would require taking a break from the book.
Yeah, so I didn't forget anything, despite how long it took me to release the 2nd book. But as I was drafting the first half of We Free the Stars, I realized that I had left behind this one character who was really the only piece of sunshine that I had in the series. And so everything was really gloomy. It was reflecting on my mood. So it was a terrible first half of the book until he came back.
For me, I have a really bad memory, and I attempt to plant lots of little threads and loose ends in the book, so I do have trouble keeping track of everything. That's just my mind, and yeah. But luckily, Scrivener, which I go on about a lot, is a really great writing software, and it allows you to just have everything organized there. So if I forget something, it's like is right there. So I can just click it and be like, oh yeah, that's what happened. Oh yeah, okay, I remember that character's motive. I remember why they want to kill that person now. Okay. So yeah, for me, just I had Scrivener and that really helped. But yeah, I know it's really hard to remember, and it's well for readers as well, which is why in City of Spells we did put a recap at the beginning of City of Spells. So for anyone that read Into the Crooked Place, it's like, we know it's been about a year. Here's a recap, because yeah, memories.
That's so smart. I've never seen that done. That's so smart.
It was even handy for me as I was writing it. I was like, oh, I forgot I did that.
Oh man, that's amazing.
So for me, I did not really forget anything major between book 1 and book 2 because there was really no gap in between. So you're sort of like you're editing book 1 just as you're drafting book 2. So it's like you sort of always have an idea of what's happened and what are the main characters and stuff like that. For me, the funny thing was that I forgot certain things while I was drafting book 2. So I forgot that, I had magic. I could use magic in this book because I was so bogged down by the historical research and about the wars and the weaponry, and I'm like, why is this getting boring? And I'm like, oh, I forgot the magic, let's put it in there again, right? So that's what happened to me while I was drafting.
Amazing. I do think I've seen like the series like recap. I know it was in Amy Kaufman and Megan Spooner's second in their Unearthed duology. Always appreciate it. I definitely forget what happens in between book 1 and book 2, and it takes me like the first 50 pages to be like, oh yeah, that's who this guy is. Right, absolutely. So one of the things I am super interested in, and I ask this to basically like everyone that I talk to, is if your book could be adapted into anything, what would you want it to be? So this is not just like defined to like movies and TV, right? It could be, absolutely. And it could be live action, animated, if it's one of those things, whatever you want. But it could also be like a musical. I mean, if they could do a Lord of the Rings musical, they can do a duology of YA books. It can be like a puppet show. It can be a like random like little kids, or not little kids necessarily, but teenagers who are putting on a like low budget play in their backyard, like whatever you want it to be. Like the sky's the limit. What would you want it to be?
For me, I really to be a movie, and then my agent was like, I think a TV series would allow us a lot more room to explore the world because Arawiya is huge. And then we sold film or TV rights to a company, so that's exciting. The second thing I've always wanted was a webtoon for the series, which I think would be super fun because I'm obsessed with that, and I feel like it kind of opens up a new book, like to find new people, to find new readers, because like everyone's reading webtoons these days, and so I think
they're so
good. Yeah.
I'd for sure want well, two things. I'm gonna cheat. A Witcher style video game, because there's 7 different islands in this world. I think it'd just be so much fun to have a big video game adventure. And then an animated TV show. I mean, animated TV, like that's just my passion for one. And then 2, I think it would just be so cool to see all of the magic. And I kind of don't want to see that as live action personally, because I have too much magic and they're gonna mess one up. And it's just gonna look funny. So like animated would be beautiful, I think.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think a TV show is always great. I think because again, the world is so big, you can do more. You don't want to rush it and condense it, especially if you've got multiple books. I think doing it in kind of one movie is always a bit of a struggle. So a TV show would be great. But then you said musical, and kind of the idea of Wesley, his little bow tie and his suspenders, just dancing around with a gun, like pew 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 pew. I don't know. I think that actually might be my new favorite thing. So let's go with musical. Why not? They can all sing about like murder.
For me, I don't really mind anything related to TV or even a movie. Like I have a very short attention span when it comes to screens. So if I'm not interested in a movie within like 5 minutes, I just stop watching it. So I have a very short attention span. So for me, I'm okay with it being a movie or 2 movies, like 2 books, 2 movies kind of thing. As I don't know, any kind of adaptation would be awesome, really.
Okay, I've got 2 more questions and then I'll switch over to audience questions. So the other is another like of my go-tos that I just always love is titles. Did you have titles in mind from the beginning, or like a title structure? Like, so like Adalyn's book and books in Hafsah's book both have like the very like we, da, or all the structure. And so were those titles something that you guys came up with on your own? Were they something that evolved through like chats with your editor or agent? Were they like you Googled every word you could possibly think of that was a synonym and tried to just put it all together on a spreadsheet, and it was really messy and you sent it away and somebody was like, yeah, and you're like, oh, okay. Whatever the case may be, where did the titles come from?
All the stars and
So,
oh, go ahead, Hafsah.
go ahead.
Okay. All the Stars and Teeth definitely came out of absolutely nowhere. I have no idea where that title came from, and I fully expected somebody to change it. Nobody did, so that's the title. For All the Tides of Fate, yeah, it was very much a 50 million spreadsheets back and forth between my editor, and it was going to actually be All the Shipwrecked Souls, but we didn't like how that would be on, like how it would be written on the title. It wouldn't match. So we had to find something that would match. So yeah, titles are a very funny game.
We Hunt the Flame was actually titled something a lot more gruesome. And it didn't really connect with this story as much, like after I went through all the edits. But before I even went through all the edits, my agent was like, I don't know if this is a good title. So I put together a whole list of different ones that I could think of, and I sent it over to him, and I still wasn't happy with any of them. The latest trailer for Assassin's Creed went out, and then I was watching it with my sisters, and then some part in the lyrics was like, it was a completely different wording, but then I thought when I was going to bed that night, We Hunt the Flame sort of popped into my head when I was like playing around with the words, and so that ended up becoming the title for the first book. And then when I was writing my editor edit notes for We Hunt the Flame, responding to her edit notes, I just added We Free the Stars at the bottom, and both of my editors like, this is a great title, so it stuck. So I never had any title problems, which is good.
I am the opposite in regards to having title problems. I am notoriously just crap at writing. Honestly, titles is not my thing. I'm so bad. I think my debut, To Kill a Kingdom, it was called like Devil Down Deep, and then The Prince's Bane, and then it became To Kill a Kingdom, which I did think up myself, but it took brainstorming with like a multitude of friends. Into the Crooked Place, it was called something else, but I can't for the life of me remember. But Into the Crooked Place came about quite early. With City of Spells, this changed title so much in the beginning of the process. And I remember I sent like a huge list of all different titles, and it was like Realm of the Bad Shadow King Man person. And, and then I was just like, I don't know, City of Spells. And then that was the one that ended up sticking. But yeah, for me, it takes like multiple emails of just lists like, right, which one isn't crap? Please just tell me, because I'm bad.
Well, with Hunted by the Sky, it was kind of interesting because I, like Alexandra, I'm pretty crap at titles. So for my first two books, my editor pretty much canceled whatever I had, and she's like, this is going to be the title. This is going to be the title. That's it. And so for this one, it had, so Hunted had a different title. It had The Star in the Sky. It was something like very, very basic. My titles are very basic. So it's like, I was just like thinking, I hate this title. I wanted to do something different. I said, let me try, playing around with it. What's happening in this book? And then I know that, okay, so the king of Ambar is hunting all these girls. So it's like Ambar in Hindi means sky. So Hunted by the Sky came to the picture. And then the second title, the second book I knew would be about a war. So Rising Like a Storm, and Sky and Storm sort of match. So I'm like, okay, I'll just throw this in. I'll throw in the series title as well. Let's see, maybe the editors are going to reject it again. They're like, okay, it's all accepted. Okay, I'll take it.
I am very obsessed with the cover in the sheet protector. Like, oh my God, I love it so much.
It's so pretty.
So my final question before we switch over to audience questions is, are there any side characters that sort of surprised you, where you thought that you were making them up just to like give the protagonist a loaf of bread, and then all of a sudden they're like a major character in book 2, and you're like, bread man, where did you come from? So I don't know why I'm on bread right now. I haven't had dinner, but were there any side characters that surprised you between book 1 and book 2, or just in general throughout the series?
Yeah, so for me in book one, there was a character called Daniel, which is a very minor character who my partner likes to say is named after him, even though I made him up before we met, but whatever, let him have it. And he surprised me because his point of view, I didn't plan on putting a point of view from him in, but then when the gang were away from the city, I wanted to show what was going on in the city. So there was just this random character who they'd interacted with right at the beginning, and it was just him every now and again, his point of view of seeing the city fall. And it actually turned out to be like, his chapters turned out to be my favorite chapters because there was like, he didn't interact with anyone. It was literally just him watching like things turn to dust, him just being infected by the magic and going around kind of killing people. And it was just this really like dark, completely pulled away from the others point of view. So that really surprised me how much I loved that. And also the character of Arjun, who was introduced as a friend of Karam's in book one. And I kind of wrote him as her friend and her connection to like her family and her background. And then he ended up having this like really fun bromance with Wesley, which I didn't expect to write. But as I was putting them together, like Arjun was kind of this really serious warrior, and you had Wesley, who was just kind of this tongue-in-cheek guy. And when they got together, it was actually really, really fun. And I wrote like them having a training scene together and them sparring together. And it was just actually one of my favorite kind of to the side friendships of the series. Can't beat a good bromance, right? Like,
Yeah, nothing beats a good romance. So the character in We Have the Flame was definitely Altier, who was supposed to be there for like, I guess the first 3/4 of the book, maybe, and then something tragic was supposed to happen to him. He was supposed to die, but the goof would just not stay dead, and so he was just always there, always needling the seer. And it's just that grump and goof, that dynamic that I realized that I couldn't kill him off no matter what. And so in the second book, he has his own point of view. That's how much he grew on me. And when people refer to the series, they always talk about Zafira, Nasir, and Altier like he is a main character, when he wasn't even, like, when it's just Zafira and Nasir and We Have the Flame. So it was, I guess he grew on everyone.
I love that, like the goof refused to stay dead. So good.
It's true.
I love all my side characters, but I guess there's two that sort of stand out to me, which are, one, her name is Shanty, and she makes a very small appearance in All the Stars and Teeth. She runs kind of like this underground magical girl gang called the Barracudas. And she is a face shifter, so she can like change her appearance into anybody else and cast glamours. And she's just really cool and like really lethal and very like into herself. Like she doesn't care about anybody else. It's just like, I'm going to protect myself. Good luck, everybody else. I had to actually give her a bigger role in All the Tides of Fate and bring her onto the main crew because she was so much fun. And then the other is Matea the Mermaid, who, from like talking to readers, I feel like that's basically like everybody's favorite. And it's just, I think, because she has no moral compass and she's just very fueled by vengeance. And it's just sort of like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna eat that person, YOLO. So I love her.
So in my case, I think for Hunted by the Sky, one character I will not mention because that would be a major spoiler, but I will mention another character, Prince Amr. He was one of the king's sons who Gul meets while she infiltrates the palace, and she befriends him. And this character was initially like sort of like, okay, it's going to be a side role character type. But then, he started talking about these things like honor and respect and things like that, which I'm like, I really need to see this in a guy, especially in fiction, because it's so hard to inculcate these values in real life. I'm like thinking about it, and I'm thinking about these old historical ideas of honor and respect and things that are, inculcated in Rajput history, especially in India. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna put this guy in. And I was thinking of other historical princes like Dara Shukro, who were like poetic and who were like, more concerned with books than they were with ruling a kingdom or with politics and things like that. So, I kind of fell in love with this character as I continued to write him. And I was like, okay, maybe love triangle, maybe not. And then my editor's like, no, you're not doing a love triangle.
It's really funny. I don't know why, but all of a sudden Adalyn said barracudas and my brain went to Legends of the Hidden Temple, which I haven't thought about in years because I think there was a team called the Blue Barracudas.
That's funny. I loved that show. And also, can we just 1 second? Love triangles are the best.
I knew you were going to say so. When
And
she said
anybody
that,
who says
I was like,
otherwise,
They are.
they're so good.
I was
And
like, oh,
anybody
wait,
just
what?
yeah, anybody just needs to watch K-dramas to like fully understand how good love triangles are.
We do. And we love of all shapes because sometimes it becomes a love hexagon.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So we have some audience questions. And again, you can drop any questions into the little Q&A box at the bottom. Well, one we kind of answered, which was, how do you know you wanted to make it to Duology? So we'll go to how or when did you decide to become a writer, and any advice for aspiring writers?
Yeah, I guess I knew I wanted to be a writer when I realized, so the first job I ever wanted was to make Pokemon real. And when I realized that I was not gonna be able to do that because I just am not that good at genetics and science, I moved on to writing. And mostly I just want to create things. It's never been about like, I specifically want to write young adult novels. It's just, I want to create and stories, and whatever format those come in, that's the format I'm going to pursue. In terms of like advice, I would say the first and foremost thing is write the book, because that is the hardest part, is to actually write and finish the book, to get it on paper. Don't worry about it being like 100% amazing. Like, that's just not how it works. It's going to be probably trash for the first draft. My first drafts are trash, and that is perfectly fine and acceptable because you're going to edit it. And 90% of writing is really editing, which I did not know going into this.
I mean, for me, I was about 8 years old and I suddenly get tired of reading books, and I said I wanted to write books too. I was that kid. And I started writing my own like little stories. I started drawing little illustrations about 3 girls who went to visit a witch on the mountain. I don't know where that is. I used to have it somewhere. Now I don't have it anymore. But that's the kind of thing. And I just started writing because I wanted to tell stories, and I love telling stories and just getting lost in imaginary worlds. And I did not really seriously pursue writing until I turned 21. And I said, you know what? I'm really tired of accounting. I really want to write books. And so that's when I really started pursuing it professionally. In terms of advice for aspiring writers, persist. I think that is the biggest piece of advice I can give you. Do not let anyone tell you that your story is not important, because that is the one thing that will keep you going forward. You have to keep persisting even in the face of rejection, because you're going to get a ton of rejection in this business. It is part of the business. Even after you get published, you get rejected. Just trust me on this as well. So it doesn't matter if someone tells you your story is not important. Put that aside. Keep pushing forward, because everyone has a voice, and your voice is always going to be different from someone else's.
Or let those voices push you onward, because there's a lot of them. Like Tanaz said, there's just, everyone's going to reject you. Everyone's going to say that, okay, you're just not valid enough, but you are. And you're definitely a lot more capable than you think you are. So if you think that this is the worst story you've ever written, it's not. You can keep going. And then the second thing is, your first book might not work out, and your second book might also not work out, but none of those are a waste of time. Each story that you write teaches you something different about yourself and about your skills as a writer. So if it takes you 6 or 7 books before you get published, you're a better writer than you were with that first book. So I think it's a good thing that your first book didn't get published. I started writing when I was 17. Before that, I wasn't a big reader, and I wasn't a big writer at all. At 17, I picked up my first YA, and I just started reading a ton of young adult before I had this like really crazy dream, and I was like, I can make a book out of this. And so I wrote that book, and I created it because I thought it was the best book ever. And all the agents said no, which is their loss. And then I just kept writing, and then I told myself I need to get published by the time I'm 20, or I will not get published at all. I'm just going to give up. but that is a totally unreasonable goal to have. And I started writing my last book. I mean, We Hunt the Flame, which is going to be my last attempt, 19, and it worked out.
Yeah, for me, I've always wanted to be a writer. I mean, my bio says it. I was 4. My teacher said I couldn't be a fairy, so I was like, okay, writer then, why not? But I was always that kid who kind of would write poems and stuff as a like a present for my family and stuff like that. And I was very fortunate that my mother taught me to read and write before I started school. So from a very early age, I was reading books, and I just loved, like, not even just stories, but actually just words. I really liked words. So yeah, writing just kind of was just always this thing. I can't even really remember when, but it was just always what I wanted to do. And then when it was time to go to university and I saw that you could do a course in creative writing, I always thought, oh, English literature is kind of what you do. And I saw that creative writing was actually an option. That was just like, holy crap, I can actually do creative writing. So yeah, that was when I went to uni, was when I was like, okay, maybe I can actually do this. Not that you need to go to university, of course, but that for me was just like, I can't believe that they're offering these sorts of things now. It just kind of blew my mind. And I think any advice to writers would just be echoing what everyone else said, of just keep going. Your stories are so important, and there are never enough stories in the world. So don't think, oh, but someone's written something like that, or someone's written this. Your story is unique, your voice is unique, and we're never going to run out of the need for books. Stories are always going to exist. So that means the need for what you have is always going to exist. So if you want it, keep going for it. It'll happen.
And just real quick, like for reference, did anybody here get published with the first book they queried, or did they get an agent with the first book they queried? I did not.
And mine was, I actually sent my agent something else, and she was like, it's okay. And then I accidentally sent her just another one, and that was the one that she signed me on. So yeah, the first book that I wrote that I thought was awesome, she was like, no. And this other random book that I didn't really think about, which turned out to be To Kill a King, she was like, oh, that one. I'm like, okay, I'll just put this whole finished complete one in the bin then.
Yeah, it takes a lot. Like Hafsah was saying, like your first book might be it, you might luck out, but for the majority of us, like you have to keep going. And I just wanted to like show everybody, like, hey, I don't think most of us here.
I lucked out after 10 years.
Yeah, so you query a lot. You query for a long time. I definitely queried like 70 different people.
Oh yeah.
So it wasn't my first agent that was like, oh.
Querying, if you do not know, is when you basically write a cover letter to an agent to represent you, and you're like, this is what my book is about. Please help.
Love me.
Please read it. Please read it.
So which book was harder to write, the first or second book, and why? And if you say that they were both hard, please explain. That part was just me adding, but
The second book nearly destroyed me. We Hunt the Flame took me a few years to write, yes, but it was also a book that when you're writing your book, before you get an agent, before you get a book deal, you're basically writing in a vacuum. You have to, that you just need to please one agent at least. But when you have your sequel and it's a contracted sequel, you know that, okay, you have to please this agent. You have to please your editors. You have to please your fans who are waiting to see what's next. And so you have all of these extra voices in your head, and being able to silence that it was impossible. It was super hard. And while I was writing We Free the Stars, I was also in-person events back when that was a thing. And it was my first time as like an introverted person being like thrust out there into like having to do events and then come back into my hotel room and like dig into my head to write the story. And it was just not happening. So yeah, it took a lot out of me, and I didn't think I would make it to the end. Like I remember looking at my phone and thinking, what if I just call my editor and told her I can't do it? So yeah, it was, I thought it would be impossible, but I got to the end somehow.
I think for me, they were both hard in different ways. Like the first book was hard because this is me like establishing the series, right? I have to introduce all the characters. I have to introduce their relationship with each other, their pasts, their presents, hint at their futures, build the world, build the magic system, kind of make it so the readers want to read more. And so that had its own challenges of like, right, I started from like with nothing, and now I have to build it up and like build a house essentially. So that's why book 1 was hard. Book 2, everything was in place. So I was like, right, going into this is going to be so easy. And then I was like, oh, but this is the book where all of the loose threads that I decided to put into book 1, now I'm like, right, now I have to tie them together in their pretty little bows. Now I have to make all that foreshadowing come to fruition. I have to make all of that build up worthwhile, not only with the big battle, but with, you know, the romances and with the characters' relationships with each other and even with themselves. So book 2, which I thought would be, you know, a breeze, and I was so cocky going into it, as I was writing it, I was like, oh damn, what have I done? And I was really mad at past me for kind of putting in all these like twists and turns, because now I was like, oh, now I've got to bloody action them. So yeah, that had its own its own trials.
Oh, I thought I was muted and okay. Hello. I definitely think the second book as well, for the reasons everybody else mentioned. You know, you're on deadline. I was also touring at the time as I was working on the second book, and then we went into a pandemic, and I was editing this during like the start of the pandemic. But beyond that, book 2 is also, it's dealing with grief very, very heavily. That is like a predominant theme in the book. It's dealing with grief. The main character has PTSD. It's a lot heavier of a book. So for me, that was really, really difficult to just make sure you get it right. You do justice to the characters, you do justice like to the readers. And then as you were saying, like you have the payoff, you have to, you know, give your readers a good payoff, and hopefully what they want, or if it's not what they want, hopefully still something that is satisfying to them. So it's a lot more pressure, I think, to write second books or like the finale for a series.
For me, it's okay. So I'm going to say this. I think that for me, every odd number book is the hardest book. That's because I know, because this is actually technically my 4th book. So it was slightly easier. It was, I think, because I just drafted my 5th one, just finished drafting it. It was like hell. I was pulling out hair every 2 minutes. Okay. So this was relatively easier. And the reason being is that with Hunted by the Sky, I was in completely uncharted territory in terms of, you know, moving from contemporary to fantasy. And I was like learning how to develop a magic system. What do you do? And, you know, am I doing something right? Have I done something that's been done 10 times before? Should I change things around? What's going on? You know, so it was like learning the ropes kind of thing. So it was definitely a little more challenging. The second book, it was more, the challenges came from mostly setting up, just writing the action scenes, because it takes an emotional toll on you as an author as well, when you're putting your characters in these intense, brutal situations. You know, it's not just fun and games. Okay, sometimes it is fun and games, but most of the time when you have to imagine these people going through these tragic, brutal situations, and like what an emotional toll it can take on them in terms of post-traumatic stress disorder and all these things that are happening. And so yeah, it was emotionally more difficult, I guess, for me, the second book. But overall, in terms of the world and all, everything was set. So that was a little bit easier, but still, I wouldn't call it easy. I'm always too afraid to call books easy to write.
Okay, I have no idea how much time I have for more questions. So if somebody on the administrative side of things would like to just like pop that in the chat for me so that I'm not like going way over time. But this other question, as we've noted, everything is very happy in these books. Nothing bad ever happens, but somebody did ask, how do you write a character death that doesn't feel like it's just there to give further purpose to a main character?
By establishing that character first, by making them a real person, fleshing them out, because it's not just your main character that needs to be fleshed out in your story, but all of your characters. They need to feel like they have an arc of their own. Like if you were to remove them from there, they would still have their own story, and the story wouldn't work without them. And so establishing this character and making you feel for them beforehand really helps with the emotional factor when they do die. And for me, one of the characters who dies in Beyond the Flame, they had a big fight with the main character. And so this whole thing where she didn't forgive him and he dies without that forgiveness. And so she continues with that guilt and that trauma and that like those emotions. And that I think really helped the emotional factor of his death. It definitely made me sadder. So I think it translated.
I mean, yeah, I agree. You have to make sure that the character's a real person and they're not just in the story to die. They have to be in the story for a purpose other than to die. And if you're going to kill a character off, don't let your first motivation be that like it's for shock value, right? I feel like if I'm going to kill someone off, I'm killing them off because it matters to the story. It matters to not only the other character's story, but to their story. Like the death is worthwhile. The death means something. I think if you're just killing someone off to be like, ha, got ya, to the readers, it's not going to be impactful. It's not going to read well and people aren't going to react well to it because it's not going to matter to them. You want every death to mean something, just like it would in real life. You know, death is a huge thing. So yeah, when one of my characters dies in City of Spells, it really affects everyone and it kind of ripples down and it kind of spurs people on, and that death matters to the story and matters to who that character is. And I think that's just the important thing to remember.
I think with me, I always think of it in this way, that if your character is attaining a goal, they may also have to sacrifice something to attain that goal. So it's that sort of concept of sacrifice that sometimes death plays a part into, that, you know, it doesn't make, realistically, doesn't make sense for both of them to come out of this unscathed. So, you know, that's when you start thinking about deaths and you're like, okay, you know what, it's not possible for every single person in my little team to escape this you know, without dying or something like that. When you're thinking in that sense, then you know that the character's death has meaning, is purposeful, and makes sense for the story and the plot as a whole.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And I think too, it matters how they die. Like how do you execute the death? Are they dying, sacrificing themselves for somebody? Is that like part of their character? Is that, you know, like true to their character? Are they dying, you know, at finally achieving one of their goals or so close to like their goal and they just can't get it? I think that is a huge thing to like pay attention to, as well as how you are executing the death, along with what everybody else has already said, which is just, yeah, making sure your character is there to be their own character.
Okay, we've got two questions that are specifically for Hafsah, so I'm going to sort of combine them. One is, when did you realize Altair is the best character? And the other is, how did you choose the 6 sister names?
So when I realized, well, I wasn't gonna name the sisters actually. They were putting together the map, and so the map artist was like, "Can we have names for them? Because I'd like to incorporate it into the illustration." And I was like, "This is a great opportunity to surprise my sisters." And so I named 2 of them after my own sisters, and one of them is Asma and one of them is Azra. So I was like, these are A names, so I'm just gonna pick 4 more A names to go with it. And then I didn't show them the illustration until the very end, like until I had them open the book. Like all the time when I was showing it to them, I would always Photoshop the names off so that they wouldn't know. And that was, yeah, that was a fun part of the journey. As for Altair, him being the best character is probably just your opinion. If you were to ask Nasir, he would not agree. But I don't know when I realized it. I guess it was when I tried to kill him off and it just didn't work.
Incredible. For everybody, how did you decide how you wanted to structure the world building for your duologies?
I guess for me, there's so many different islands, and I, you know, kind of split the books up on navigating different ones, so we can have different fun islands to explore throughout each book and keep things like different and lively. There's one island, and I will always be so sad about it. There's one island we didn't get to, just because it's like a 3-3 split for each books, and when there's 7, that doesn't really work. But for me, yeah, it was just very much, what can I make feel fresh and new? There wasn't really much else thought behind it except for what was fun.
So the world of Arawiya is set in a world. It's set in a world inspired by ancient Arabia, and so while it was basically me telling myself to incorporate as much of the culture and the tradition and that world as I could, because it's a region that's like so often demonized or exoticized, and I was like, this is actually home for millions and millions of people, and I wanted to feel that book. And that was what I kept in mind while I was writing. And at the same time, I wanted it to feel like it was welcoming to people who have a background, who have that heritage, and also to people who just don't know much about that region. That was where I approached it from. And then I decided I want to go all out. One of my biggest goals was to make sure someone drooled over the food description. And so I did go all out there too.
Yeah, for me, I kind of wanted to create this big world, this big battle that actually affected people from around the world. I think a lot of the times in kind of like old school fantasy and like dystopia, a lot of the things were like, it was the end of the world, but you were always in kind of like one city or something like that. And those stories were fantastic. I was like, I really want to just create a battle that affects everyone, because in the real world, if there's kind of like something bad happening, it has ripple effects and it affects everyone. And I wanted to show that, and I wanted to show characters from all over the world coming together to fight against this thing. And that's kind of where Crooked started. So it's a world of like 4 realms, and each of those realms have cities, and each of our main characters is from somewhere different in that in those realms and in those cities. And they all kind of come together in this one city of Crete. And this is like the city where dreamers come and where dreams come true. And that's full of magic. So they all kind of end up coming from all over the world to this one place. And they almost become a family because of that. So yeah, that's where it started off, of just bringing everyone together from kind of different places and with different motivations, and just making them into one big found family.
With Hunted by the Sky, I was taking inspiration from 15th and 16th century India, which wasn't even modern India as we know it today, but a region that was called Hindustan. And I had to think about how my fantasy kingdom of Ambar would be both similar to and different from a typical kingdom during that era, because India, as we know, was colonized by the British, and oftentimes history is told through that lens of colonization. So I had to essentially learn how to decolonize my own imagination to figure out how different and similar the kingdom would be. And I had to think of many things, like, for example, how did this kingdom treat love, or different kinds of love? As recently as 2018 in India, homosexuality was considered a criminal act, and it wasn't until 2018 that the Supreme Court decriminalized it. So I went back and researched, and I found a lot of medieval court poetry, for example, where men were expressing their love for other men. So I thought, oh, it makes perfect sense for Amber to have an annual festival celebrating the love of 2 gay goddesses, and that kind of thing. And I started going back to India's roots, and I started bringing in these things that were possibly demonized or were exoticized by colonizers. And in terms of religion, whether or not different religions coexist relatively peacefully in India on a normal basis, and I kind of brought that in there as well. There is problems in Amber, definitely. The society is divided in 2 classes based on who has magic and who doesn't, and oppression takes place over there. But on other levels, different religions coexist peacefully. There are holy men. India has an abundance of holy men. I kind of wanted to bring that in, the saints and the gods and all these people. It was just, I was trying to bring in what I knew of my culture and my country into this book, and just trying to, hope that other readers who were not familiar would also find a place and a home in it.
And we are just about out of time, so I would love if everybody could sort of wrap up by mentioning where folks can find you online, whether it's social media or your website, and also if you're able to tell us sort of what you're working on next. I know at least 2 of you have announced things, but if you have something that's announced, let us know. If you have something that you can give us vague hints about, great too. Or if you're just making dinner, like, that's cool too. Like, whatever you're working on, just let us know.
Okay, so I'm online everywhere at Hafsah Faizal, but I've also gotten on TikTok, and I'm at Hafsah_Faizal, where I'm wasting a lot of time. Don't tell my editor. I am now working on a new duology. This time I've decided it is going to be a duology. I'm not going to try to expand it. The first book is called A Tempest. It's set in a world that is actually expanded from We Hunt the Flame, and it's actually parallel England, which has the main character is from Sri Lanka, which is where my parents are from. And so they she is actually the owner of a tea room, which doubles as a blood house that serves to vampires. And so she has to strike a deal to save that blood house. And so she puts together this crew of misfits where they have to pull off this heist and steal something from this elite vampire society to save her tea room.
Love it.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you can find me online, Twitter at Ali Cristo, Instagram at Alexandra Cristo Writes, and www.alexandracristo.com. I don't know how much I'm allowed to say about what I'm working on without getting in trouble, but it's a YA standalone fantasy, and it's romantic. It has kissing, it has killing. I don't know what I'm allowed to say. I might get told off. Just watch this space.
Yeah, I am online. I'm mostly on Instagram at author Adalyn Grace. I am working on a book called Belladonna. It is, as of now, a duology. We'll see. I always change my mind on these things. It is about a girl who can see spirits and who is whisked away to this very eccentric place called Thorngrove Manor, where she is met by a spirit of her late aunt who tells her that she did not die of normal causes. She was murdered. And now Signa has to find out who the murderer was, and she has to team up with Death himself in order to do it. It is a Gothic-infused murder mystery. There is a lot of kissing, and the romantic interest is Death, and that's really fun.
I want it.
I'm very excited for it.
Thank you. I'm excited to finish it.
You can find me on my website, tanazbhathena.com, or on Instagram at Bhathena Tanaz. I'm working on something. As I mentioned, the book had me pulling out hair, and that's all I'm going to say about that one.
I'm ready to pull out my hair when I read it.
Yeah. That's enough to make me want to read it.
And you can find all of our author's wonderful books at the link that Brittany has posted in the chat. And you can find me everywhere at Wreck-It Rachel and BuzzFeed.com/Rachel Strolle.
Yay.
Thank you all so much for coming. I am so excited that I got to listen to all of you talk about your amazing books, and I'm so excited for all the things you guys do next. And shout out to Brittany Perlman, who posted the link in the chat. You can go get all of your amazing books at belmontbooks.com/event. You can find this event page, and they're all for sale right underneath. Thank you all so much for coming. It means the world to us here at Belmont Books, and I know to our authors as well. Stay safe out there, everyone. Keep reading amazing fantasy written by these incredible women, and we hope to see you all again very soon. Thanks so much for coming, you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all so
Thank
much.
you.